Well, folks, here they come. Hollywood moves to Illinois to help celebrate the homecoming of the First Lady of Movieland, Dixon's own Luella Parsons.
This was the executor of Hearst's Hollywood power. Luella Parsons was more than a reporter. She was a pillar of the industry, bringer of Tinseltown's news to millions through her radio show and her gossip column in every Hearst paper.
Well, Luella was a devoted slave of Mr. Hearst. She was very nice to know if you're on her side. And she could be very nice and could be charming. But, oh boy, look out.
Luella was feared by everyone in Hollywood, but her number one enemy was her younger and smarter rival, Hedda Hopper. It was Hedda who saw a tiny notice in the Hollywood Reporter, a screening of the unfinished Citizen Kane, January 3rd, 1941. When the film ended, Hedda rushed the news directly to San Simeon, and that sent Luella Parsons into a frenzy.
Luella called and demanded that she see the film that afternoon. And when the lights came up, she was purple and her wattles were wobbling like a turkey gobbler.
He stormed out and said, you know, you're going to hear from Hearst and our lawyers and this and that and the other. She was frantic, very, very distressed, and took off. Within days, the word was out that Hearst was absolutely furious about this film and wanted it destroyed. Period.
Hearst maintained the public stance that he never saw the film, but he knew what was in it. Charlie Lederer said it was the portrayal of Marion as pitiful drunk. That Hearst would not abide. Whatever the reason, Luella Parsons took 3 weeks off from reporting her column, weeks she devoted to killing Citizen Kane. She called the office of RKO Chief George Schaefer and threatened one of the most beautiful lawsuits in history. Another RKO man quoted her thus, "Mr. Hearst told me to tell you, if you boys want private lives, he'll give you private lives."
Hearst threatened the industry in every way he could think of. He recalled scandals, drunkenness, miscegenation, crimes of various kinds that he had at the request of the studios suppressed in his newspapers, and which remained, I assume, in type somewhere. He reminded them that the country that read his newspapers might not look kindly on the high percentage of Jews in the industry.
Hearst's sources warned through the Hollywood Reporter that their papers would crusade against all the major studios for giving employment to refugees and immigrants instead of handing those jobs to Americans.
I think what he was saying was, you Hollywood people who crave respectability do not want the country to think about and talk about and dwell upon the fact that you're all Jews, and that many of your key executives and directors and writers are now refugees from Germany. And he was right. They didn't want that. So they pulled the movie.
Louis B. Mayer assembled his fellow studio chiefs, and in their name he offered $800,000 to buy the negative for the express purpose of burning it. RKO begged for a meeting with Hearst and nervously postponed the premiere. Meanwhile, the real owners of the studios, the money men who held the stock, gathered in New York.
I got a call from my boss one Monday morning saying, listen, there's a great urgency that you go to New York with this print of Kane because they need it back in New York very, very urgently. You must get on a plane and go. I was told I was to take the print of the picture to the music hall where they had a projection theater there. Now these were the chairman of the boards, head men of all the major studios, and their lawyers. The purpose of it was to see, after looking at the picture, whether the companies would say to RKO, in the interest of our film industry, put this film on the shelf, don't release it. That was the first time I realized the film was really in danger. Orson was there. Orson knew what was up. It wasn't that he was there just by accident. He knew that this was a very crucial point in the film's history. And he spoke to him for a few minutes before we started. And I always have to laugh to myself thinking that I was the only person from Hollywood that saw Orson give one of his greatest performances.
With a stirring oration about the tyranny loose in the world and the value of free speech in the U.S., Welles won out in the New York meeting. The last thing these men of business needed was a public fight over the Bill of Rights. Citizen Kane would be released, and now it was a real Orson Welles project. The film was a cause célèbre.